Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Grossman, and I'm privileged to serve as CEO of the Initiative for Competitive Intercity, or ICIC for short. And we're particularly proud to be co-sponsoring this event, this conversation with Black restaurant owners from all over the country during Black History Month with the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts. And I'll be introducing its president and CEO, Segun Idowu, in just a couple of minutes. But I may be the one speaking on behalf of ICIC, but I want to acknowledge and thank a number of my colleagues. First of all, Mike Shore and VMI, who run our data strategy and innovation team, who led this effort from the start. I want to thank the 10,000 Small Businesses team, headed up by Sonia Moyne, and I'll have a little more to say about the 10,000 Small Businesses effort, because some of our participants today have gone through the 10,000 Small Businesses program. I want to thank the Intercity Capital Connections team, specifically Indy Taveras, for her work in building this event and in providing some of the materials for it. But I particularly want to thank the real heroes today. That's you, the restaurant owners, both panelists and participants, who have survived and thrived by pivoting, by being innovative, by being kind and generous and supportive of their communities, who've gone through more heartache than you should ever have to go through in a lifetime in business. And we all know that as of December 2020, 9 months after the first stay-at-home order, more than 110,000 restaurants have closed, either permanently or long-term, according to the National Restaurant Association. This is an industry that's been hard hit beyond what most industries have been hit, and particularly for those BIPOC-owned businesses and those Black-owned businesses. Well, we're going to hear about that from our panelists today. I want to thank those representatives of the media who are here from different parts of the country to report on this panel. They've been amazing, reporting about businesses, restaurants, particularly Black-owned businesses during Black History Month, to focusing on the challenges, the opportunities, and the importance of patronizing these restaurants that are open in these times of strife. So our gratitude is boundless, and let's now get to our panel. So I want to introduce our moderator, Segun Idowu, the president and CEO of BECMA, the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts. I'm holding up right in front of me an article that appeared in today's Boston Globe. The quote from Segun is, "We will be louder." And if you know anything about Segun and what the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts has done to focus on the inequities, the unlevel playing field in which Black-owned and BIPOC-owned businesses live in Massachusetts and beyond, Segun is a spokesperson, and he's building an amazing organization. We've got 4 restaurants represented here today, and I want to thank Terry Evans, owner of Windy City Ribs and Whiskey in Chicago, a participant in the 2019 Intercity Capital Connections program, and an alumna of the 2020 10,000 Small Businesses program as well. I want to introduce Nia Grace, right here from our hometown of Boston, owner of Daryl's Corner Bar and Kitchen, who not only tries to run a restaurant as her day job, but also is the founder and head of the Boston Black Hospitality Coalition. Based in Boston, she's a graduate of the 2019 Intercity Capital Connections program. I want to welcome Brent Reeves, president of Smoky John's, Inc., which is based in Dallas, a 2016 10,000 Small Businesses participant and 2017 Intercity Capital Connections alumnus. And finally, the dynamic duo from Brooklyn, Fifi Bell Clanton and Gwen Woods, owners of the Krabby Shack. As I said, based in Brooklyn, participants in the 2019 10,000 Small Businesses program, as well as winners of the 2020 Intercity 100 Award, representing one of the 100 fastest growing inner city businesses in America in 2020. In all, there are 3 Intercity Capital Connections alums, 3 10,000 Small Businesses participants, alums, and 1 Intercity 100 among the panelists. We're going to be sending you some information after this panel about our small business programs, how you can nominate and or apply for those. And Indy Tavares will make sure that happens. But I've taken already too much of your time. I've borrowed too much of the time from Shagun as our moderator. So Shagun, take it away, you and the four panelists, and let's have one of the most dynamic conversations that's been taking place during Black History Month. Shagun Idowu, President of BECMA, the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate that warm introduction, and you're taking the place of my mother, who certainly would have done the same thing of holding up the Boston Globe business page. We were proud to announce some of the hires that we've made and the growth of the organization to continue to advocate on behalf of Black businesses here in the Commonwealth. I want to thank you and ICIC for hosting this event and partnering with BECMA to hold this conversation, this very important conversation. And in particular, I want to thank Indy and V and Mike and the rest of the team for helping to make this particular event successful and possible. So good afternoon and welcome to all of you for our discussion on surviving through COVID with a focus on our Black restaurant owners. Today's conversation will highlight the methods of our esteemed panel, or that our esteemed panel have been using to survive COVID-19, but we're not going to center the conversation on this survival. Certainly every Black History Month is a reminder and a celebration of how we as a people have survived. Indeed, it was Dr. King who said in his letter from a Birmingham jail that if the inexpressible cruelties of slavery could not stop us, then the opposition we now face will surely fail. We know how to survive. Now, today, we're going to center the majority of our conversation on how these shining examples of Black excellence and success have positioned themselves to thrive beyond our current predicament. Our goal today is to ensure that other business owners on the call walk away with tangible ideas and tools to apply to their own ventures to ensure that the Black economy continues its positive impact on the national economy, and what an impact it's had. An April 2020 report from the Brookings Institution noted that although minority-owned businesses were more likely to shutter during the Great Recession, they helped stabilize the economy during the recovery period. In fact, nationally, minority-owned businesses helped to add 1.8 million jobs from 2007 to 2012, while firms owned by white males lost 800,000 jobs, and firms equally owned by white men and women lost another 1.6 million jobs. It's clear from this report that Black and other minority-owned businesses not only impact the health and wealth of their own communities, but the economy overall. A McKinsey report found that 50% of Black-owned businesses are concentrated within 5 sectors. And this is partly why we were able to contribute so much to the economy following the recession. These sectors include things like retail, hair care, personal care, and of course, the restaurant industry. We may not have the same impact, though, if measures are not taken to invest in our businesses and if we don't prepare for the post-COVID reality. A further McKinsey report in last July forecasted that if it's these same sectors that we're overrepresented in that will take the longest time to recover from the pandemic, up to 10 years. And so today, we're going to talk about our restaurants and how we can ensure that they thrive. Food is the centerpiece of our community, and restaurants are the bedrock of our economy. With 41% of Black businesses reporting that they've closed since just last July alone, it's imperative that we do everything we can to save and scale up those who remain. And we've got a great group of folks who are going to help us do just that. Steve has already introduced our panel. Many of you had an opportunity to read their bios before joining us today. And so we're going to jump right into the conversation. I want to start off with Fifi and Gwen. Each of our panelists has led an interesting life before the current role that they have now, as we gleaned in their bios. And so I want to start off here with Fifi and Gwen, just talking to us a little bit about your journey in life in general, leading up to your ownership of your business, and then talking about that journey running your business prior to the pandemic. So Fifi and Gwen, I'm going to start off with you.
So, hello. So Fifi and I, we met about 17 years ago, actually through my late husband. so we became good friends, and Fifi was a fashion stylist. I was in the music industry. Kind of both of us just not happy, wanting to do something different. And Fifi came to me one day at a dinner party at my house. She said, we call each other babe. She said, babe, I want to open up a crab restaurant in Brooklyn. And I thought that was an ingenious idea. Fifi's from Philly. She grew up eating crab. My dad is from Portsmouth, Virginia. I grew up eating crab. And at the time, there weren't any crab places in the New York City area. And so we spoke a little bit about it more that day. And then not too long after, one night after a long day of work, I called her at like 2 a.m. and I said, babe, you really want to do this? And she said, absolutely. And we quit our jobs and we opened up the Krabby Shack. And that was about 6 months later.
Ooh. It was scary, but we did it.
Congratulations to the both of you for making that leap. And I'm sure that's a theme we're going to jump into later on today. Terry, I want to come over to you and if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of your story leading up to your ownership and starting Windy City Ribs and Whiskey.
Sure. Again, thank you for the platform and being here. So my story is a little bit different in that I was scared to death about the restaurant and food industry because one, my family will tell you I do not cook. So I don't have that background that most people say, oh, I've always wanted to own my own restaurant. But I've always had a side hustle and I've always loved the idea of how do you create your own wealth strategy. And so I had spent 17 years in sales and marketing in the automotive industry. And the opportunity came up that a gentleman that owned this business in the South Loop, he had 2 restaurants and he was looking at selling one of them. And so I took that leap, but I will tell you, it was scary. I remember literally crying down at Chicago's downtown, getting my business license. And I was like, what am I doing? I don't eat ribs and I don't drink whiskey. So these are 2 very things that are like so extreme from a standpoint of getting into this business. But I knew customers. And so I knew what great customer service was like. I knew I could execute on that. And then in my background, I spent a majority of my time in sales and marketing. So I figured that was a good mesh of the 2. And then through history and doing some research, I found out that my great grandfather, who was, when he got his 40 acres, he took those 40 acres and made it to 3,600 acres, but he also sold whiskey. And so I brought that into the ability to be able to stand on his shoulders and say, I got to figure this thing out because I've got a 7-year-old that's counting on me to make this win. And so it is with that gives me the hunger and the drive every day to go in and try to figure out how to grow this business.
Well, I can't wait to visit the Windy City and have both of the things that I enjoy the most. So I want to, and I'm saving Nia to share her story. So Brent, I want to come over to Dallas, Texas, and get you to share with our audience here your journey in operating your business.
Yeah, so I started a few years ago at this point. My dad actually started the business in 1976. He actually is John Reeves. He was a serial entrepreneur and had multiple businesses. He was in the real estate business. He also did roofing, different construction jobs. And what he would do was once he finished a job, he would give his client either a smoked turkey or a ham. And so people love that. And all of a sudden he started getting tons of calls for turkeys and hams and not roofing jobs. And so at one point he had like over 100 turkeys and hams in his house, and his friend came over and he was like, bruh, you need a restaurant. This is ridiculous, So he decided, he's like, you know what, I better go ahead and do a restaurant. And what he would do is he would put coveralls over his 3-piece suit. And he learned how to run a smoker from a old white guy let him come and work for 6 months for free. And he learned how to run the pit, learned how to run the smoker. And he would take the coveralls off, go back in his 3-piece suit and go back to his office job. He did that for 6 months, got started, and really started a really thriving business. We had a lot of the greats that would come through, Johnny Taylor, Al Green, BB King would come and he would play, and he would come after his sets and he would just play. And he'd tell my dad, he said, "Smokey, I'm gonna keep playing till the ribs stop coming." And then so he'd come and hang out, and so we had all these different people that would come in for a number of years. I grew up around this all my life, so really all I know is cooking. And I decided, you said, you know what, I was going to get a hotel restaurant management degree, and let's try to take this to the next level. So my brother and I joined the business in '99, and so this year will be 22 years for me in the restaurant industry. So it's been a crazy journey through this industry.
Well, congratulations to you. And I got to tell you, your father, I'm going to take tips from him because Steve will tell you, Nia will tell you, no one's ever seen me not in a suit. So I'm glad he found ways to get around that by wearing those overalls. So I gotta follow his example. Nia, I want to come to Boston after traveling the country here and get a sense from you about your journey prior to your ownership of Daryl's, and then what that's been like.
Absolutely. So happy to be here. So happy to meet Terry Evans because I like whiskey and I like ribs, and I've had a chance to have both at her establishment, and I love crabs, and Brent, I'm coming to get barbecue too. So super happy about all of that. My story is, I think, similar in terms of I was on a different path. I was in nonprofit management for 12 years. My focus was community engagement and development. I was sitting here trying to figure out how I could get resources back into my community to make it better, simply. I went to school at the University of Miami. I spent the time in New York doing entertainment booking. But I came home, and I came home because, like I said, there was something that just drew me back here, knowing that I could take my talent and, help my city. But while I was sitting here, being in my professional life, I had to find that other space. So after work and after home, where else could I go? And I walked into Daryl's Corner Bar and Kitchen 10 years ago, and it was different for me. I felt comfortable. I felt at home in a city that, in fact, I had always felt like the true minority and, kind of out of place. And so when I walked into Daryl's, to smell macaroni and cheese and candy yams, you could smell that when you walk through the door, to hear music that was grooving, that was live, and then turn the corner and see people looking like me, and the art on the walls representing my culture. It was something just super special. And prior to that, like when I was in school and when I was in New York, I used to do entertainment production, and I used to, just produce a lot of different events, different kinds. And so that spirit kind of walked in here when I came in, and I said to myself, if I ever owned a restaurant or a place, I wanted to be just like Daryl's. 5 years later, fast forward, I had the opportunity to work here, to use some of my professional skills in marketing to promote the business, and then had an opportunity to become a manager here, and it just felt so natural. And I think I kind of walked away from the business thinking like, well, what am I going to do? I think I'm going to go right back to corporate. The hours are better. It just seems like that might be more my speed. But something just drew me back to the industry, and I had an opportunity to talk to the owner, and to me, it was almost like magic. He literally looked at me and said, if you're really interested in taking it to the next level in this business, we should talk about you becoming the owner of Daryl's. And for me, what was so special about that is this is a business that has been in the community, Black community here in Boston since 1957. It has historically been rooted that this corner was the place that we could gather safely, do business safely, and do what you're talking about, Terry, build wealth. And so to be able to look at something that I was super passionate about just in general, I love to entertain, I love to cook, You know, and I love to bring people together for that community building. It just was super special to me, and I couldn't believe it. So I was equally scared. I was equally like, I just spent this time, you know, nonprofit work, and I know how to fundraise. I know how to ask for money, maybe, you know, but I don't know that I know how to really like take this business and grow it. But that's a part of my story that we'll probably talk about more later. Just the opportunity to say yes. You know, I don't even know how I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to afford this, but I'm going to just say yes because you put it out there. Let's go. Let's do it. So I'm here today and happy to, you know, share a story about surviving.
That's right. Well, and I can attest to anyone watching that Daryl's has some of the best food in the city of Boston, not just soul food, but the best food in the city of Boston. There's something about these hands when they touch the food, it just something magical happens. So, on this point though, as you mentioned about it was scary to take over this business, trying to figure out how to maintain the business and grow it. And same for you, Brent, taking over a family or legacy business. And even, you know, Fifi and Gwen starting something completely brand new. I want to give folks a sense of the challenges that your businesses may have been facing prior to the pandemic, because even though all small businesses have been impacted by COVID-19, Black businesses in particular were facing some pretty big hurdles. And so, Nia, since this is a point that you brought up, would love to hear just a little bit about some of the challenges you might have been facing. And then I'm going to open this to the rest of the panel just to share some obstacles that you were trying to overcome that are now exacerbated by the pandemic.
Definitely. For one, when the pandemic hit last March, I was just over my first year of ownership. And so, you know, being a young business or young entrepreneur at that point too, we didn't have the same reserves stored up that restaurants with even 5 years at least that made it over that hump had. So it was a very scary time. We actually, you know, just got off of you know, a fairly successful Black History Month, as well as the start of the year. We had a good holiday season. And like I said, just in the first year, thought that things were going well. And then you just really had to, you know, stop and plan and figure out what was next. One of my struggles was having that crisis plan. You know, again, I kind of jumped into the business and, you know, it was something that I was passionate about, but I was still learning along the way. And so when I talk about, you know, what are you supposed to do when the government tells you to shut down? And that's all you knew how to do. You just knew how to operate at this point in time. I know how to sell food. I know how to be in the restaurant. I know that 90% of my numbers comes from people actually being here in this space. What am I supposed to do next? And so, I mean, it was handling that from so many different aspects, from how do I talk to my vendors? And again, new credit, you know, is this going to look bad if I push something off? If I say I need a pause just because I don't know what's next, are you going to take that out on me, you know, in terms of banking? When it comes to my staff, I know that our businesses are employing our neighborhood people, you know, and so when I send my staff home and I tell them that they have no more work and they were depending on that, be it whatever their experience or their life that has happened before them, they needed this particular job. What am I supposed to do then? And I, you know, I sat in a sad space for a little bit, just being, because I just didn't know how to do it. And I realized that I even had to get through that piece of kind of forgiving myself because no one knew how to do it at that point in time.
Any of the other panelists face any challenges prior to COVID-19 that that you overcame or were still trying to overcome before the pandemic hit you? I know, for instance, for Fifi, and I'm coming right to you, Brent, Fifi and Gwen was reading another report that shows that and when it comes to startup capital, you know, Black businesses usually get around 30,000, average of 30,000, whereas white businesses will get about 100,000 in starting capital. So wondering, you know, if you faced anything similar, if there were other things you had to consider opening up in Brooklyn.
So one of the first things that we did during our first year of opening is, you know, during the build out, Gwen and I used our own savings to start our business. And we actually didn't even know, when we did go to the bank, they were like, well, you're a new restaurant, so there's no history. There was no, you know, reason to give us the money. That's how I felt. So we had to take it upon ourselves. When we did need extra money, we ran out of money during our build out. We did a Kickstarter campaign, but this was when Kickstarter just kind of the crowdfunding just started. My father, I remember him saying specifically, show me a Black person that raised more than $100 on this app that you're talking about. And I couldn't find anybody. At the time, it was literally Spike Lee. He was raising money for a movie. At the end of the day, we didn't have another choice. So we did the campaign, we did the Kickstarter, and we needed 25,000 to finish building out the hood. We ended up raising 28,000, and we were able to open up our restaurant. Following, like fast forward to COVID, pre-COVID, right before COVID happened, we were trying to figure out how to pivot in regards to getting more marketing, and also trying to send our business to start shipping nationally, sorry. And we needed money. And I used the resources from the 10,000 small businesses, which was a lender pursuit. But again, as you said, asking for a certain amount and only getting $30,000 was exactly what happened to us. And then COVID happened, and it actually didn't, we didn't actually fulfill it until during COVID. We were actually shocked because at this time, the loans hadn't come out yet. And this was like right in March. The loans hadn't come out yet. And we were like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? So we ended up getting the loan, and we're actually used that money to build our website just to start shipping nationally, which hit right on time because that was how one of the ways that we were able to pivot. So now we're turning to, shipping nationally. We're only takeout at this time, takeout and delivery, but we pivoted to start shipping nationally. And that was something that would, gave us extra income during that time.
And Brent and Terry, as you're thinking about some of these obstacles that you faced prior to COVID, we'd love to hear as well how COVID, well, Brent left us, it's all right. But Terry, I'm gonna come over to you. As we're thinking about obstacles you faced prior to COVID, I also wanna hear about how COVID-19 has impacted, has exacerbated those problems for your business. And then we're gonna start talking about kind of the aftermath of all this as well. After your response.
Sure. So I'll pick up off of what actually both panelists have mentioned. The capital component. I do think there's some level of culture related to just having debt as a business owner, because I'm hearing from Krabby Shack, it was like we put our own money into it. Nia, it's a very lonely place being a business owner. So when you're out here and you're trying to figure out how to do it, and you don't have that blueprint of, have that nest egg and reserve of $100,000 in the bank to be able to just breathe a little bit better, just be creative. Like it's a stress point when the economics are not matching up. And so I would say is we had very similar to Nia, we had just come out of February. If you remember, Chicago just had the All-Star basketball NBA All-Star here. And so we were packed. I mean, we had just had one of the best markets and quarters actually that we had hit, right, from the standpoint. And then the entire universe got quiet. I'll never forget it. It was Friday the 13th. When things started to say, wow, this thing is really escalating, and things started to close and conventions started to say, hey, this is not going to happen. And so for us, because we're in that tourist space within South Loop of Chicago, we really saw that 80% drop in revenue hit immediately. So there was no time to kind of, let's figure this out. And then, similar to Nia, our employee base is from the community. And so when you're looking at someone face to face and you recognize the fact that they depend on this paycheck, this is not a side hustle, they depend on that paycheck to figure out how they're going to pay their bills and take care of their family, you as a business owner are carrying that weight behind you and on you. So it was definitely a stress point for us coming out of just being in this business for a short period of time and not having those reserves. But what I will say is, and I think what you'll find in the DNA of all business owners is we have to figure it out, right? So we find ways to take that 80% drop in revenue, and how do we move that to takeout? How do we shift our business, and how do we shift our audience base from not being inside, but gather that audience from outside? So I will say that that was one of the things that we had to do and get very, very tapped into, as well as really figure out the narrative of our financials. That was one of the positive things that I think did come out of the pandemic early on, is that I could tell you every single utility bill, what I was paying, who I was paying, what vendor, when it was due. I mean, you just had no choice but to really, really get deep into your numbers.
Brent, I know we lost you for a second, but I know you wanted to chime in on how you were facing some obstacles prior to the pandemic. So if you want to share, we'll get to that, and then we'll jump right into COVID-19.
Yeah, so it was difficult for us. Well, so we actually were having a record-breaking year in 2017, and then we had a devastating fire that took the whole restaurant out. And so we actually did not open back up to the end of January 2019. So when we opened back up in January, we're blowing and going and booming. It's going great. And then COVID hits again. So it's like, you know, we were down 16 months from the fire. But the beauty of it is that I think it prepared us for what we were about to experience with COVID. The struggle of trying to run a restaurant when you don't have a restaurant is harder than even having a restaurant where you can't have dining. So there's a lot of things we learned how to do in the midst of dealing with a building that was burned. We found kitchens and places outside that we could still prepare and do catered events for. So we learned a lot from the fire, but it just was, you know, it's just another hit that seems to come at you again. But you know, we're very resilient. As Nia said, Terry said, you're resilient. You got to keep going, because you keep looking at these people who are around you that you're leading, that have families and people that they have to take care of. And guess what? That's now my responsibility. That's how I take it.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And there's a theme here of the fact that all of you were experiencing record moments for your business until COVID smacked that down, which I think is important for folks to understand that, you know, oftentimes we focus on the negatives in our community, but Black businesses were on the rise, and COVID has taken the wind out of those sails. There's another theme here that I'm not going to touch on today, but certainly want to be able to be in conversation with you all after this, is thinking about even the cities and towns that you're operating in, and what role or effect that has had on the growth of your business and the ability to help you survive. I mean, especially coming from Boston, you know, we look to places like Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, New York, and the wealth of Black people in those areas. And but we'll do that at another time. I don't want to, because we'll be in conversation for 3 hours. But Brent, I'm going to start with you here because you started to touch on it. Terry, you did as well. So we'll go to you after this. How you've been responding to COVID-19, how you have made that pivot in the midst of all the chaos that's happening around us.
Yeah, so for us, when COVID hit, again, you look at your team, and there's no way. One of the things about my dad was he would not let anyone go without. It just wasn't going to happen. He would do without before anybody else would. And so we kind of have taken that same thing to heart. And so I looked at my brother, like, hey, we got to figure out how we're going to do this. And what we started to do was we went live every night. Our customers couldn't come in through the door. So what we decided to do was we're going to get on Facebook, we're going to get on Instagram, and every night we're going to talk to them, let them know how we're doing, see how they're doing, because they're all at home. That way, you know, I think Nia was talking about the experience that you feel when you come into their place, you know, that vibe, you know, and that's what we missed having. And it's really hard to do that with to-go only, you know. So what we decided was to connect on social media. After that, we also decided we knew where our market was. Our market was at home. So what we decided to do was to create delivery routes all around the surrounding suburbs, everywhere in DFW. And so we started to pin different areas against each other and see who could order the most from us. And so it started to be a competition. So week after week, we would see who the winner was or who ordered the most food from one area. from Dallas, you know. So and when people saw us fighting, that made them want to get behind us, and so they just started ordering more food just because they were like, "You guys gonna fight? Then we're gonna support you." And so that was the amazing thing that we saw. And then that really was our turnaround. I mean, because we saw 55% drop in sales. We lost, as soon as COVID hit, we lost $45,000 of catering for that month. That all was gone due to events because they canceled. But we started hustling, and we just started getting out there, figuring out a way to get our name out. I learned from a person a long time ago, you put your marketing dollars and advertising dollars when you need it the most, you know. So it's like, it's not the time to get scared money. This is the time to put the money out there. She's like, you know, this is when you got to double down, not, you know, you double down when it hurts, you know. So that's what we decided to do.
No, that sounds good. And I'm about to start following you guys on Facebook so I can tune in. Terry, I'm coming to you on this question: how you've been impacted, how you've pivoted in the midst of the chaos. And Fifi and Gwen, I'm coming to you right after, because especially as new business owners, wondering how you have responded to this crisis. But Terry.
You know, what's so interesting about this time period, and we talk about this as being business owners as a lonely place, I was able to really dig deep into my growth strategy because I was in the Goldman program in the midst of this pandemic. And I will tell you that for me, it was the singular most important thing, because I couldn't just stay in the depths of depression with regards to looking at the numbers. And I was constantly working on a weekly basis on figuring out, okay, what's the game plan once this pandemic is over? What's the growth strategy? How are we going to get through this? So for me, it was a constant reminder on a weekly basis, at least a few times a week, on working on growth, right? We didn't have as much success. Brent, I wish I could have called you and knew you at the time, because I would have been trying to do those same campaigns. We didn't have as much success with takeout, but we did have to figure out how to do it well, because, you know, food doesn't travel the same way. We're used to having people within our restaurant. That community aspect, the soul, the vibe is definitely what I think you'll find Black restaurants, they provide that for the community. And so now you've taken that platform away. So we had to really, really get creative with that. And although I will say that we've grown our takeout business, it wasn't enough to be able to close the gap that we experienced from indoor dining. But what I will say is that we just really got deep on the strategy and the numbers, so that when the pandemic started to open back up, we saw 25% capacity restrictions lifted, and now we're at 40%. We would be ready for what that looked like afterwards. So although the journey was not the same, it allowed us to kind of dig deep into the business practices and strategy, like refresh of the brand. We collaborated with a ton of networks and resources of feeding people on the front line, getting really deep into how can we help within the community and finding those resources to support that. So that's what we did to pivot during the pandemic.
Thank you for that. And Fifi and Gwen.
So our story is a little different. When we opened in 2014, we were basically the only crab restaurant. And now today, there are a bunch, there was an article last week about 10 crab restaurants opening in Brooklyn in a 5-mile radius. Crazy. So the crab craze is happening right now. And so when right before the shutdown happened, I got sick. And then I was sick during the shutdown, and Fifi was left on her own. I couldn't help I couldn't help a bit. And I couldn't do much, but she was panicking. You know, I couldn't even talk actually, but she was panicking. What are we going to do? Do we shut down? You know, the New York State is talking about, we might shut down, we might not, but you know, it was all this fear because we're in New York, and New York was bad. It was really bad. And we decided she kind of decided to stay open. It's like, we're gonna stay open, we're gonna do it. I mean, she was working long hours, and it was slow. People were scared to step out, you know, didn't know. People didn't want to step outside, you know, people didn't want food made from anyone.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, oh, we're gonna cook at home, but that got tired quickly because you know people after like 3 weeks of cooking at home, you know, everyone's like, okay, I need to order out. And the other crab restaurants that were open they tend to be Asian-owned crab restaurants. And because of everything that was going on with Donald Trump and calling it the Chinese flu, it was this whole thing of being, you know, people did not want to touch, unfortunately, you know, Asian anything. And we actually saw a huge uptick. And
like 80%.
yeah, so we were the only place open. People were like, we want our crab. And so we had to actually, some of our staff left because they were too scared. So we had to hire actually new staff. And we definitely try to, this is one thing we pride ourselves on. We do hire within the community. We totally believe in that. And we found some local people to come work with us. And we just knocked it out with
pumping.
Yeah, with
We were
takeout
pumping.
and delivery.
Pumping. It was like, I didn't understand how my kitchen, as small as it is, was actually doing it. I mean, I couldn't even find the paper bags fast enough. So this also helped us implement bottling our food and being able to package, pre-package certain salads or coleslaw and just already have it packaged already, as opposed to what we normally do. And so it actually helped us make our business more efficient. And as far as, you know, going into the winter, that was summer. We had an excellent summer. We saw once the city started opening up a little bit that our numbers started to go back to normal. And then the winter hit and it was like, whoa, you know, we had a negative $7,000 in October and we were like, wait a minute, what just happened? And so we built this a very expensive structure, and Gwen was against it, saying our demographic is not going to eat outside in the cold. But I felt I wanted to spend the money because I really wanted to make sure we had seating. She was right, I was wrong, but I wanted to say, you know what, we have to get creative. Now that we built this structure, what are we going to do? We started booking jazz bands, and people were like dying for an event, like an energy and different vibe. I mean, the whole street was crowded, but you know, social distance, there was people across the street, but listening to our jazz band singing right outside the Krabby Shack, it drew, we created a winter cocktail menu. We had hot chocolate spiked with vanilla vodka. Like, we were just really trying to figure out what events we could do to make people want to come to our place, want to buy from us. It's cold. We did an event with somebody where everybody had to dress up in ski clothes because we were trying to prove something. We're out here in this cold, but I'm warm. I am just fine. And if you really want to support, you know, your New York restaurants, then you have to go out and dress for the occasion. We need your help. We need your support. So it was constant doing creative ideas and events like this that will help you stay alive. And then the community sees how hard you're trying. They see it, and then they want to support you even more.
Yeah, and I must add that our customer base, our customers are so loyal. We couldn't have done it without them. I mean, they were coming in saying, hey, you know, we want you here. We love you guys. You are a Black-owned restaurant. You are women. We do not want to see you fail. And the support that we had from our Black community was amazing.
Now so we've heard how you all are putting on events to keep folks engaged. You're engaging them online. You're using it as an opportunity to transform the business internally. I want to come to Nia, who I would love for you to talk about how you not only were saving your business, but how you were engaging other restaurants in the city to advocate for more resources and support for all Black restaurants in Boston.
Absolutely. You know, for us, what good is it to be in the market if your friends aren't there too, or if there's no other place to go to? And that's how I look at it. The landscape would be super lonely. In Boston, where we have 1,435 businesses that have liquor licenses, less than 2% are owned by African Americans. We are a majority city at this point. I think a majority minority city in terms of our demographics. And in our spaces, we have maybe one or two bars or you know, third places that we can go and unwind and have that community feel. So for me, what good would it do if, when we got through the pandemic, we were 50% less of what we barely had in the first place. And that's why myself, actually a former manager, but new owner as well of District 7 Tavern here in Boston, Royal Smith, and 3 other restaurateurs, we started the Boston Black Hospitality Coalition. Our goal was to focus on how we could help and support each other immediately. It started off with just information sharing between how to navigate the PPP and the next loan and the next grant and the next cycle of, actually even just sharing that information because all of us weren't on all the same lists. So that became that level of support. Back to that note about, crisis management, how did you do it? How did you do it? How can I take this piece and how do we make this, better? And then asking that larger question, how do we really never find ourselves in this situation ever again? How do we build our own resource so that when it is time to go to the pool, and not just during a pandemic, but maybe just in that growth phase or in that expansion phase or in that new idea phase, how do you take where you would typically go for friends and family and go to that, economic builder that can say to you, great, here, we've got some money for that to help you out. No strings attached, none of the other things that typically may go into this process of exchanging money. Just like you said, that crowd fundraising, let us be that. So our goal was in the immediate to figure out how we got through that. And we've been lockstep, since. And it might be just phone calls and texts and meetings and emails in between. We go ahead and we take that opportunity to support each other. But right now we are working with different partners, including BECMA, on how we can see that long-term health for our businesses and how do we double the numbers that we currently have in this market and get to a real good amount on what we have here in the city. So I'm really excited about that kind of work.
Absolutely. And it's important work that we want to see replicated all throughout the country of, it's like there are no industries for us. It's all about its community. There's the restaurant community, there's the tech community, et cetera, because we all are focused on supporting one another and seeing each other grow. To this point, restaurants in particular I said in my opening comments that they're the bedrock of our economy. And part of that is not just the fact that people go to restaurants, but also the economic impact that restaurants have on our community, not just through the revenues that are earned at the restaurant itself, but the wages that are paid through these restaurants. And as several of you, if not all, have mentioned that your employee base comes from the communities that you're also serving, which I think is critically important. So as we're moving to, and I also want to note for the audience, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll do our best to get to them before the end of the discussion. But as we're thinking about post-pandemic, whatever that looks like and whenever that comes, knock on wood, it will be within the next month. Vaccines are getting out there. But wondering, I want to come to you on this, Terry, how businesses, so as you're thinking of coming out of COVID, first of all, thinking of how you're preparing for this reality, but also thinking at the same time how your businesses can help to contribute to generational wealth, helping to eliminate the racial wealth gap, because we know that Black businesses, it was mentioned earlier by the panel, that our businesses hire people, we contribute to the communities, we give back to our communities. So wondering how you're preparing, and also, particularly in your bio, you talk about creating a strategy of turning your business into a national brand with an equity platform. So we'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that, and I actually learned this from TJ, who owns Urban Grape, and he has created this just amazing platform of ensuring that we're building people within the industry and finding them, right? Because one of the things that I struggled with is how do I find managers and people that look like me to come in and step into that space so then I can continue to do the work and grow the business as opposed to working in the business, right? And so what I found is that they exist. You have to look for them and find them. But what's so interesting is you can have a cook that has worked in your kitchen for 14 years. Like I received a staff when I purchased the business, but they don't have the mindset that they deserve to own their own business. And that was baffling to me because as a person who has always felt that I was, put on this earth to do great things, I want to ensure that I'm also putting that into other people. And so what I have challenged the individuals that I bring in or that work for me is to think about, and it may not necessarily be in the restaurant industry, but what is it that you want to do? What is it that I can help you to be the platform to help you to do? Now, if it warrants it's a restaurant, then great, because my goal is in 5 years to set up a situation where I have a franchise model that every person that comes in has to be an equity component and an owner, because you can't build wealth by working for someone else. And that is just the reality and the truth. Like you gotta be a risk, you gotta throw some risk in the game in order to see the type of results if you want to really truly build wealth. So there's an equity component to that franchise model that allows for every owner to be able to come in, or every worker to come in and be an owner within the business. And I think that it changes the mindset as well when people understand that their input can bring something that has an impact, not just for themselves, but for their kids and then for their community. There's a different level of light that I think shines in a person when you're walking in the door, knowing that you're building something that's beyond just a paycheck. So for me, that's what it's really about.
No, and you're definitely onto something. It's a couple of businesses, at least one here in Boston, has done the same, City Fresh Foods, and it's an incredible model. And appreciate your being a leader in that space. There's one question from the audience that I do want to ask all of you, because everyone here is trying to figure out, how do we support you? So Jen Fagel, who's the executive director of Commonwealth Kitchen here in Boston, asked a great question. Besides cash, because we know that all of our businesses need that direct injection of fusion. Besides cash, what are the 2 to 3 biggest needs that your businesses have for the next 12 to 18 months? What help can business support organizations provide to each of you? And this is for anybody on the panel. I won't force you to talk.
I would. It's a tough one, but I can only give you like 2. Aside from cash, support for marketing, because I think that now that our businesses are pivoting and we're all still trying to figure out how to tackle this new world we have, this new lifestyle, I think marketing help, and also even like interns and stuff, people that might want to come and maybe work for free, but want to learn something, and we'll take something out of it in the end. Like I can foresee right now, I mean, our summertime is huge. And now that we did spend all this money on the outside seating, I would love to have, we don't have a waitress wait service restaurant. Ours is fast casual. So you order your food and then you pick it up and you take it and sit down. I would love to have somebody to be able to bring out and run the food out. But I don't know if I have the money to pay for somebody on staff for that, but just things that as we start to pivot and learn, because we've never had this many seats outside. So we're not used to that. So that would be helpful, just to name a few.
Or social media, that is something always. It's like, my son, who's 13, always like, teasing, like, Mom, come on, that's like really old. Don't do that, and it's like those types of things, to help engage customers, engage people, bring more people in, and that's where the youth can actually come in.
A lot of us we're entrepreneurs because we work hard, we're resilient, we don't give up. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm computer savvy and that I know about all these social media things that I'm supposed to be doing. So if without cash, if these organizations can provide some of that help, that would be awesome.
Yeah. I think the other thing to add on to your point, I think that's great. And I think also too, something that's so small as positive reviews and providing us that conduit to be able to get into their network. So it could be catering, within these business networks. It's thinking about us when it comes to your catering decisions, because those are the types of things that make a huge impact in just being able to open the door for the day. So that's it. I think the resources of employees and strategy is also key. And I think what you'll find, and it's probably for a separate conversation, is that to the point here, and even with this panel, with the exception of Brent, who grew up in the business and understanding the business, we all grew up in other industries. And so, understanding what it means to run a kitchen and margins and menu profit and loss. Like all of those things are so important to be able to survive as a restaurant business. Is very different than surviving as a general business. And there's aspects of that I think that you need to have that skill set, or either know how to hire that skill set to be able to grow and to be able to flourish in the industry.
Nia?
I would add to that, when we think about growth, a lot of us maybe kind of went into it thinking that this would be the one venue. But when I walked in here, I know that I wanted to do more. I wanted to have multiple units. And so investor readiness, I think, is something that, we're not necessarily prepared for. We may not know how to create that deck, or we don't know the language or the conversation that we should be having. And I think that that's my goal, and I thirst for that. So whether it takes 5 different advisors to get to that point where I can create the appropriate deck that someone's going to look at it seriously and say, you know what, you're investable, and whatever I need to do to get there, that's what I'm kind of looking for. And I think that would definitely help us. That we're setting our mind on growth from the onset. So there's that. And then if we have those other relations to technology, I think we can probably all attest to how technology probably saved us as well during COVID-19. And it was probably doing so before then. And so being able to have those technology resources that allow us to stay cutting edge and make ordering easy, and make it so that you can have a hybrid model where you in fact can at least drop food off at the table, even if someone orders it directly from their seat, and cutting out, half the wait time and making it comfortable too. So that's what I think.
No, these are all great things to point out, and I know everyone is busy taking notes on all the suggestions that you all just made. So we're past our time. We're at the end of our conversation. When we all get together to talk, time doesn't really matter, but for the event it does. So before I kick it over to Steve, just wondering if any of you have for 10 seconds, any bit of wisdom or advice for business owners who are tuned in today, just to leave them with.
Persevere, don't give up, keep fighting,
right.
Dream big.
I would say get into the numbers, have a strategy and a goal, and get comfortable with what you're uncomfortable with. So if it's accounting, then get into the numbers still, or if it's marketing, get into marketing, or align yourself with someone that can help you to achieve those goals.
Mine would be the creativity is your way out. I just believe that for every situation in life, not just business. I think sometimes we get stuck and we don't realize the gift of creativity that we have inside of us, and how that will take us to where we need to be and want to be.
And I'll just say that remember why you started. A lot of us were scared to kind of be in this space, but remember why we started, and I think that'll drive us home. So,
well, thank you all very much, and certainly this has given me a refresher and some empowerment for the work that we're doing to support Black businesses. So thank all of you for your perseverance, for your success and your resilience, and we'll look forward to supporting you forever to come. So Steve, I'll kick it over to you.
Well, I'm going to take just a couple of minutes, and as I speak very briefly, you'll see some upcoming events that ICIC is sponsoring. And we're going to send all this information to all the participants, so I won't go through each one of them. But if you're looking for education, coaching, training, mentorship, and access to capital, some of these events are directly related to you. What I heard today was resilience. I heard the gift of creativity. I heard community building. I heard innovation, imagination, pivoting strategies, access to capital, the importance of technology, more grants versus forgivable loans, something that Shagun and I worked on from the very moment that first disastrous PPP was offered out there, and we still need more grants and fewer forgivable loans. I heard investor readiness, importance of pitch decks for equity capital, particularly if you want to grow. I heard the 2 or 3 biggest needs are you need a strategy, marketing, internet strategies, importance of social media, talent management, one-on-one coaching and mentoring. And above all, what I heard is a group of 5 incredible people, or 4 in businesses and 6 incredible people who have created their own special nationwide support system for almost anybody who could benefit. We're going to take this, it's recorded, we're going to share it, we're going to push it out to our 22,000 distribution list. I want to close with Jen Fagel's wonderful words in the chat at the very end. You're all rock stars. We're grateful to all of you. Thanks so much for making this afternoon so meaningful for everyone who dialed in. Have a good afternoon. And as my father would say, work hard, have fun, and don't panic. Have a good afternoon, everyone.